Hi, I'm Cheryl Duffy, divorce coach, mediator, and founder of the Divorce Centre. And I'm joined today with Wilks, Stepfamily coach, who's going to talk to us today about financial stress. So we'll be talking about the financial stress for co-parents, but also for step-parents as well. So welcome, Ali. So what's the best way for couples to talk about money issues in their home?
So it's been interesting because it's not just exclusive to step parents or couples in step families. It's, lots of couples in general have a hard time talking about money, but it's important to talk about. So it's important to set time aside to have those conversations. It's usually I don't know what the saying is, but there's a really good saying that can't come to my mind right now. But it's basically, an ounce of prevention. That's what it is. The ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? And so it's really important to get ahead of challenges that might be coming down the road, and even do some planning. So it's important to, like I said, set that time aside, once a month, to discuss even business things that have to happen in the family, partner has to leave out of town for a business trip, or there's a tournament that's happening for the children. So that's type of thing in terms of scheduling and those types of things, but it also has to include finances. And if you have a hard time, there are many online quizzes you can take to help get that ball rolling. I can probably provide some, maybe you even have a few resources, but it's really important to have open talks, open dialogues about spending habits and certain things like agreeing on consulting about big purchase items, and being open to budget ideas and plans, and discuss savings. So when I actually pulled a few of my stepmom participants in the stepmom groups that I'm admitting, that was some of the things that they really talked about is, we really need to have discussions about budget ideas and plans and how to stick to them. But communication is the biggest challenge around money issues, because in blended families, and you'll talk about that, is that there's typically one income, and that would be, in this case, it's more often the father who has to do child support and also is responsible for, the house that he resides in with his partner, and if they have children together. So it's really important to be upfront and share and be open. The other thing that was brought up as something to talk about is savings and wills. So having a discussion about what's going to happen in the future. That was another key piece that was brought up. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm sure that there can be a lot of tension and stress, particularly if there's an unequal amount of money being spent on the new family unit versus the old family unit. So there must be some stresses there.
Or vice versa, because a lot of the times I've heard where stepmoms are saying, we can't even put our own children in sporting activities because the first family, one of the children is in an expensive sport, like here it's hockey, and that can be in a very expensive investment for equipment and ice time and all of those other things. It gets to be quite expensive for sure. Yeah.
So when stepmoms come to you and talk about that inequity of what's been spent in each family, how do they reconcile how much money is that the ex is having to pay out to the first family, to their ex?
So one of the ways that I've suggested in the past is to have a separate account for child support and extra expenses. So we have a little bit of a different lingo when it comes to you know, the subsections of our law and family law and whatnot. And so, like I said, it's important to have a separate account for child support and extra expenses, and then a joint account for living expenses and household items in the newer blended family. A perspective I love to share is that one of the stepmoms that I knew shared her perspective of how she managed, you know, when I first was in this relationship with my partner, she didn't have children and they didn't have children together, but he was still financially responsible for his children from his first marriage. And so she said that she had to, in her own mind, get to a place where she thought that child support is just another monthly bill that he has to pay, kind of like, you know, income taxes here in Canada, or union dues, or medical coverage. So basically she kind of put it in this is a bill that he has to pay, and then kind of just automatically subtracted it, and then looked at what they could pool their resources together. And so here in Canada, it's very much a separate account, where a lot of stepmoms here in Canada, don't know if it's the same in Australia, but there are women who are very worried that their own income will be calculated into child support calculations. And that's not the case here. So it's very much the man, the father, is responsible to provide that balance, unless of course it's the female, the mother, that has been the main breadwinner in the home, and then it changes the dynamics slightly. Yeah.
Well, here it's very much the father has to sort of pay, it's not part of the money that the stepmother comes in with. So it's very much the same. But I suppose that they could also have like a separate account for their day-to-day living expenses, where they both put in the same amount, so that the step-parent isn't feeling that their money is being consumed in supporting a family that's not theirs.
Yes.
So that they can then keep their savings like for themselves as a buffer, whilst the father can use his portion of his savings to be paying for the child support, so that there's no resentment built up, that the step parent may be feeling that the money is going to support another family. So
yes, and you've exactly accurately nailed that down to a T. That's the resentment that a lot of stepmoms that I work with have identified, is that that piece that you shared right there. And it's that resentment about managing the money and it going to the family or to the children that they haven't given birth to. And that was expressed very clearly many times. Yes.
It'd be very hard. So separating it so that the income from both of the step parent and for the father who we're talking about, being separated, so that only what their combined bills are that they're needing to pay for living in that property would be better off, so that the other parent doesn't build that resentment. So
right, absolutely.
So how do step parents come to terms with the heavy debt load of the divorce that he's actually bringing to the table?
Yeah, I had this experience with in my own personal life, as well as in the work that I do with other stepmoms. And it took a little while for me to figure those pieces out. Although that being said, I mean, I came with student loan debts into our relationship as well. So, and I mean, that's kind of how you have to look at it. Some women may be financially free and independent and don't really have a debt load, and then they marry a partner who does. And it is really about, I talk to a lot of stepmoms, it's really about giving yourself permission to grieve that your partner has had a life before you came into the picture. And that sometimes is an underlying piece about, this debt load and, the child support and whatever. That can become, like I said, and you said, it's a bit of a sticking point. So I talk about the grief and loss and giving yourself permission to feel the anger or sadness that he is having to pay for your household and the previous one, but also being grateful that he's wanting to take care of his children and wanting to be responsible and a part of their lives. Because I've had many women who have shared that, that their partners don't really want to provide or be responsible for their previous family, and they find that to be problematic. And why is he shirking his responsibility? What's it going to be like if something happens to us and our children? And so we have to look at kind of the both sides of the coin there, and try to implement even those previous strategies and those previous questions about how do you wrap your head and heart around that. It can be a very challenging process, for sure, and it takes a little bit of time and may require some navigation on the part of people like you and me in terms of our coaching and our expertise and helping people navigate that. Because like I said earlier, money talks are very difficult to have even in first-time relationships where there's no divorce history. Yeah,
it would be very, very difficult. And also feeling that you've taken on part of that burden yourself, coming into a relationship that has that sort of commitment to the other family, can sometimes probably feel, well, where do you fit in the priorities of the household in being supported? So it would be very, very difficult for step parents to sort of manage that challenge, I would think.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. So that kind of segues us a little bit into the questions that I'm going to be asking you. So how are clients going through separation experiencing financial stress?
Well, it can affect both of them in the sense that they may have had two incomes coming in, so now they're going to have to reduce down to one. And their lifestyle may have depended on having those two lifestyles. So there's going to be the situation where they're going to have to modify their lifestyle or go out and get some more income from somewhere or reduce their expenses. But there are situations where that may not be able to happen, because you may have a situation where it's a stay-at-home mum who doesn't have independent income, so relies heavily on the ex still supporting through that separation phase until financial support, the financial settlement completes, because they're needing to have that child support, they're needing to be able to continue to look after the children if they're the primary carer. So they're going to need that continued financial support from their ex. But the problem being is the ex who may have left, he or she may have rented a property and still have that obligation to fund the mortgage as well as a rental property, so that they can actually be separated in two homes. And, it might not be feasible that they have that financial sort of buffer that they can support two homes financially. So it's really, really important that, during that time of discussion about or thinking about separation, it's really good to have a plan, an exit strategy, so that you can think about, well, how are we going to survive it as separated parents financially? Because sometimes I see lots of people will have a huge argument and say, that's it, I've had enough, I'm done, pack their bags and go. Some people, they may not even have an independent income when they make that decision. They may not even have a support network to go and stay with other people. So they may just do a knee-jerk reaction and just leave, which, if it's a safety issue, of course they need to do that. But if it's not a safety issue, it's really important to sort of stop yourself from doing that knee-jerk reaction and think about, okay, how on earth am I going to, support myself when I do leave, so that they can put that into a plan and think, right, well, in 3 months' time, I'm out of here, but I've got to work out how I'm going to support myself, the kids, or whatever that family structure is going to look like. So yeah, so it's really important for them to have that exit strategy.
Pre-planning, right? Like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Like I said, yeah, it's tough, right? And sometimes that's why people delay separating and divorcing, because they don't have a lot of that stuff set up ahead of time. Yeah,
definitely.
So how can people divorcing plan their financial future when it is so uncertain then?
Well, it's really important to seek legal advice so they can understand what their entitlements are. So if they can have a look at what the best case scenario is, the worst case scenario, and what there is as the possible outcome. Now, a lot of people think of, well, I've been told by my lawyer I can get 70% or I can get this percentage. And they think of, well, that's the best that I'm going to get, and that's what I want, and there's no budging. The problem is financial settlement and separation is all about negotiation. So you'll be negotiating with your ex, who is also hoping for their best case scenario to get the most amount of money they can. So don't plan on, okay, I'm going to have 70%, so I'm going to do this with the money and that with the money, because you may not get that 70%. You may get 50%. So you've got to look at what's the possible outcome that you're going to end up with. And as I say, if you have that legal advice, just to understand what your entitlements might be, but don't take it as verbatim as that's what you're going to get. Because as I say, it's a real negotiation phase. So, it's hard to sort of try to plan your financial stability post separation or divorce until you really know what you're going to get in the long term. So that planning, you can have plan A, plan B, plan C, thinking, oh, well, if I get this much, this is what I might do, or if I get that much, I might do that. So it's all about planning. It's back to planning again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And once financial settlement is completed, what should divorcees do with that lump sum?
Well, it's really important to gain that financial advice. So if you get a lump sum, you don't want it to be whittled away quite quickly whilst you're still working out what you should do with it. So it's really important to seek that advice so that you can work out, well, can I afford to buy out my ex of the family home? And I come across so many people who they're set on, I want to stay in the family home, but they may not even have an income. So it's really, really difficult to think, well, how would you pay the mortgage? So it's about getting that financial advice to get some realistic understanding about what the possibilities might be post financial settlement. So when they get this lump sum, they might be able to downsize to get a smaller property. They may only be able to afford to rent. So it's about working out how to invest that money so that it doesn't just, get eroded by just living expenses. You want to be able to invest it if possible and be able to work out what you need to do to be able to have that financial security going forward.
Right. And definitely a lot of people forget that, there's court costs and legal costs and all of that stuff too, and that can take a big chunk out of settlements and who gets what and payments. And it's can be very challenging here. And I would imagine there as well, where it's like lawyer fees, you're still having to pay that down, right? And that's where court costs can be difficult post separation or divorce. And then sometimes that's where that spillover happens in the blended family. And that's where sometimes stepmoms get very stressed about that legal debt load that they have, not just, you know, having to pay off, you know, credit cards or car loans or even mortgages and things like that. It's the court costs that can chew things up as well, fairly quickly.
So the key is to stay out of court, and understanding that it is a negotiation. See, I just find that there's so many people that they just want their best case scenario and they just won't shift from that. So then they end up going to court because that's where it's very adversarial and there's a winner and a loser. So you want to be able to both win and get an acceptable solution. So through mediation, you can do that. You can still stay empowered, but have that neutral facilitator to say, okay, you know, let's get an understanding of what the issues are, explore options, and come to some form of win-win solution. Because you can spend thousands and thousands going to court, whereas that money is better off in your pocket, both of your pockets, in being shared, so that you can then use that to set yourself up for your financial future. So it's really
absolutely, yeah, for sure.
So we could talk about finances so much for co-parents and for step-parents, because it's a huge, huge issue that impacts during separation and blended families and so forth. So, you know, it's really, really important for families to really have an understanding about how financial stress impacts their relationships as well. So therefore, as you say, the communication to be able to work through what people can do to relieve that stress and be able to make sure that they're working through those issues together, not having the blame of, oh, well, it's your fault, you know, you brought the debt into this family, now we're struggling. So it's about working together and being united and being able to work out, well, how are we going to, you know, you pay off this debt, or how are we going to build this into our family budget so that we can work through it. So
absolutely, team approach is definitely the way to go. Absolutely, united front. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Ali. As usual, it's been very insightful.
My pleasure.
It's really great to be able to combine that co-parent and step-parent, because the problem goes across both. Any sort of theme that we talk about impacts both co-parents and step-parents, and of course the children are in that mix as well. So thanks again.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to our next session.